Hey y'all, hey, welcome in. What you're about to watch is a replay of my Accelerate Your Ashe workshop. In this workshop, I provide a plethora of information, tips, and tricks on how to increase your personal spiritual power. In this workshop, I discuss topics such as self mastery, releasing religious indoctrination, the importance of developing ritual practices, divination, strengthening intuition, and so much more. Make sure to have a notebook and a pen handy because there will be journaling prompts for each section that we cover today, okay? And for those of you who are interested in going deeper into this topic, I do have a tarot reading specifically for you. It's called the Accelerate Your Ashe Tarot Reading, available on my website, daydreamaustin.com/store. In that reading, I will take an intuitive look into what you personally can do to increase your personal spiritual power. So head on over to my website if that's something you want to explore. Enjoy. So, as you know, my name is Day Oyabumi, and I consider myself an intuitive messenger because I'm able to pick up on like the subtle energies in the air, right? I am an initiated Orisha priestess in the Yoruba Ifa Orisha tradition, and I am a visionary. So, in addition to being able to see things intuitively, I just have this keen sense of identifying how things are going to go, how trends are going to play out, and things like that. So, my spiritual journey began back in 2010, and it was actually during my Saturn return. So, I didn't even know what a Saturn return was at that time, but it was a serious experience. I had grown up a Christian in a Christian household, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to, not all of a sudden, it started when I was in college. I started feeling like I didn't believe all of the tenets and practices of Christianity. And I started to feel like why would we think that there's only one savior, one way that all of the different people in the world should go? So I started feeling confused. And because I am an Aquarius sun sign, a North Node Leo, and I have some other placements which make me a really independent thinker, I was just like, okay, I can't keep like fronting. I can't keep, ignoring the fact that I know I don't believe in this anymore. I have to follow what I'm feeling. So I went in search of a new spiritual experience, right? And I left behind that religious indoctrination. And it was hard. It's still like I'm still digging pieces of that out now because it roots deep down within the being. So I started to dig that up and went on my own path. And through the practices I found, right, the ritual practices, my love for divination, and now meditation, I accelerated my Ashe. And Ashe is like your spiritual power and authority. And we'll get into what that means. But today I want to teach you how to use some of these tools to do the same thing. Okay? So it wasn't, and I gotta be honest, it hasn't been an easy journey or a fun journey all the time, especially being someone who's so different from most of my friends and family, right? Everybody I'm around is a Christian. So to go on this path has been tough. It's been sometimes isolating. It can be, it can be a time, but I'm glad I've done it. What we'll be discussing today is we'll discuss what Ashe is, because I know that's not a common term. We'll discuss self-mastery, which in my opinion is one of the biggest, most important aspects of accelerating Ashe. We'll discuss briefly releasing religious indoctrination, developing ritual practices, divination and strengthening intuition, and the importance of meditation and mindfulness, okay? All right, let's discuss what Ashe is. So, Ashe is a Yoruba word that refers to one's spiritual power and authority. Now, the Yoruba language is, and of course, connected to the Yoruba people in Nigeria, typically, right? that region. But one thing about that language is words can mean multiple things. So when we say ashe in my spiritual tradition, we say ashe like it's amen. We say it in different ways. We talk about power of the tongue. We call that ashe. But in this case, we're going to just discuss it as one's spiritual power and authority. Okay? So just like a muscle can be strengthened, we can strengthen our ashe. We can strengthen our spiritual power and authority. Okay, like that's very important to remember. And we can accelerate it with many different practices. Now, today I'm going to go over some, but you may be drawn to other practices that can really boost your own spiritual power. And one of the things that's going to be really important is I'm going to want you to be open to what comes up for you personally, because there's a practice that I might resonate with that may not sit right with you, and that's okay. All right. I really want you to know that, because sometimes I feel like spirituality is kind of like sold as this one size fits all thing, and it does not work like that. It really doesn't. So when Ashe accelerates, we can experience alignment with higher consciousness, right? That's definitely number one. When you get to a point where your spiritual power is like top tier, you're basically at one in complete alignment with your higher consciousness. So my belief is that we have a spiritual double that is sitting in the unseen realms right now. And I have some beliefs that go against what I've been taught. I was taught that this our higher consciousness kind of helps us through and chose our path. I'm starting to feel like we were forced to be on the planet spiritually by some, I don't know if it's a malevolent force. I don't know what it is, but that's some of the ways I'm feeling. Like we were kind of pushed. Like, hey, y'all are going to Earth. Y'all are going to have this experience. So, but either way, when your Ashe accelerates, you become one with that higher consciousness. And I feel like it just kind of, you bloom like a flower. Your soul, your spirit kind of opens up, and you're able to take in so much more of what this experience is than you do typically, So that's one thing. I feel like self-confidence, self-love improves. Of course, intuition and powers of manifestation increase. And I believe it's easier to attain a state of inner peace and maintain that state when you are in alignment with your spiritual power. Okay? So, a couple of notes about this. Much of what we're going to discuss today, and just much of this work in general, is based on developing new empowering habits, right? Increasing your spiritual power is not something that happens overnight. And I do think there are exceptions to the rule. So maybe there's a person out there where they started doing something yesterday, and then today they're fully realized and enlightened. I don't see that happen very often. This is like a process, right? And it's a steady progression of wins over time, typically. That's what I've learned. So you'll start doing something and you may not see the results of it right away. You may not see the results until months later, or sometimes even years later. So that's why it's important that you commit to being in this for the long term. Your spiritual growth and development is a long-term practice. And I think one of the things I got used to from being a Christian was this notion that, all you have to do is this and you're fine. Like, all you have to do is go and say, hey, Jesus, I accept you into my life. And then you're good to go. If you die, you go to heaven. It was kind of like this instant thing. But with spirituality, I've noticed things take, it takes steps. Things take a while to kind of build up, especially your own power, spiritual power. So, like I said, you got to be in this for the long term. And today I'm helping you craft a plan for increasing your spiritual power. And these are just suggestions. They're not absolutes. Because like I said, there are certain things I'm going to discuss today which may not make sense to you, and that is absolutely fine. And I'm going to ask that you do the work, right, to tune in and identify what works for you or what you're being drawn to. Somebody might work with crystals, but maybe crystals don't really resonate with me. I know people who work with the fae, they work with fairies. They commune with them, and that has helped them to excel and expand consciously. Everything is going to be based on you. We're all, that's what I love about the divine. It's so diverse. Everything is different. I think that's for a purpose. There's a reason behind that. So remember, suggestions, not absolutes. When I'm going to present today, I would suggest like certain ones I'm going to say, hey, you really should try this. But for the most part, I want you to be open to the experience, okay? Okay. So now let's dive into self-mastery. And this is like the biggest one, y'all. Like it don't get no bigger than this. There's nothing more important than self-mastery and overcoming the lower nature, okay? So for me, I see self-mastery as overcoming the lower nature. I feel like we all have what people would consider the shadow, right? Those aspects of ourselves, which are challenges and things like that. So working through those things, right? The lower nature consists of harmful thought patterns and behaviors, lack of emotional management, etc. But the thing that stands out for me with this, right, with the self-mastery is overcoming the harmful patterns that we've kind of fallen into and have perpetuated over time. So we all have patterns of thinking, patterns of behaving, right? We can be triggered and we start to think a certain way. We can be triggered and we behave a certain way. How do we break through that? And I would like to share one of my ideas. This is another one of my thoughts. But I feel like, you know how they talk about the Antichrist, right? I feel like every person has an Antichrist. Mine's is called the Anti-Day. This being, right, or thought form, whatever it's taken shape as over time, it basically is like an amalgamation of doubts, fears, confusion, unhappiness, right? And from time to time, this anti-you is going to rise up and give you a hard time. It's just going to do that. This is life. We don't get away from it. Even people who claim they're super spiritual, they may have different ways of seeing it or dealing with it, but it's going to come up. That's just life. Until you're fully realized and enlightened, maybe, then it doesn't. But I don't know anybody, even the most conscious people I've met. Like one of my teachers is fully actualized through meditation, right? And he still goes through hell sometimes, and he still has these ways of like behaving and acting. I'm looking at him like, man, this is the most conscious person I know. And his shadow side still gets flared up and things like that. So when we're talking about self-mastery, we're talking about addressing that anti-Christ energy, that anti-day energy, that anti-you energy, right? Now, we can't talk about self-mastery without discussing the fact that many of us have unhealed trauma and, unhealed and unaddressed trauma, which leads to the perpetuation of these unhealthy patterns. And this is something we'll get into as spiritual beings. Sometimes people tend to kind of turn their nose up at that stuff and act like it doesn't impact them, but then they're, acting out those patterns consistently. So just ignoring it doesn't make it, false or make it, something that's not there. Like it's there and we have to face it, okay? So this is something that I call energetic debris, right? When we have these unhealthy, the unaddressed trauma that leads to unhealthy practices, this leaves like a debris. An energetic debris that kind of walks with us is actually like a garment. So we all have this garment that has this energetic debris that has built up over time, over the years, unless you're really good at getting that off of you. But a lot of people aren't. We'll go through something, it'll kick our ass, and we'll keep going, and we don't really address the real problem. So that's most people, right? Some people do good with it. So an example I want to give, and this is a trigger warning, is about like domestic violence, right? So I don't know if you've ever known women who have experienced domestic violence again and again in relationships, and they kind of move from one abusive relationship to another. And this is not just physical, it can be emotional, violence as well, right? And these people just keep going, they keep going. And one of the reasons why is because there hasn't been a full stop doing the inner work to identify, okay, why do the person can't blame themselves for being with someone who is an abuser, but why am I putting myself in this situation again and again? What do I need to learn about myself? What do I need to heal to see that I'm better than this? And I don't have to be a part of these types of relationships again and again, right? And then another instance is someone can work at toxic workplaces, toxic jobs, and maybe that's been their experience and they feel like there's nothing out there that's better for them. But the truth is, these people have become stuck in these patterns, right? It's patterns of behavior, patterns of thought that we perpetuate based on our just going forward instead of just being like, wait a minute, I don't want this anymore. So in my opinion, these patterns become like energetic blocks and they remain in place, right? That energetic garment remains in place until we're like, wait a minute, I don't want this anymore. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And what do I need to do to stop it? Once you stop moving through life on autopilot, right? And just allowing these patterns to just play out without you being aware of them, that's the first step. So once you're not on autopilot, right? And repeating the same harmful thought patterns and behaviors again and again, you're becoming conscious of these patterns. And when you become conscious now, like you said, it took you a while, but you saw it, right? But once you see that, you have the opportunity for disruption. It's when we fail to recognize the patterns that are happening over and over again, right? We're going, and a lot of people do this. I know you can think of a person right now in your life who falls into every pattern of thought and behavior and does not fight it. They don't see it. They just let the shit go. Your job is to be the person that's like, wait a minute. No. It's like, okay, there's the stimulus, right? The stimuli. And then you get the space in between your reaction to the stimuli. So see it as a line. The stimuli, there's the line, your reaction. Once you can get to the point where after the stimuli, you're stopping on that line, like right dead center in the middle. Wait a minute, how do I handle this differently than I have in the past? Or how do I handle this in a healthy way? In my opinion, you're winning when you do that. Those are big wins that we don't think about, because at some point in your life, you couldn't do that. You didn't have the consciousness or the awareness to do that, and now you do. So I want you all to celebrate those wins. Like recently, I had these notes, right? And I have a note that says consciousness is key. Like, be aware of every moment. And I remember years ago when I first started doing this work, I would just react. I would just fall into these patterns. And now, even though things are still not perfect and I'm not perfect, there's more of, there'll be more times where I stop after the stimuli. And I'm like, wait a minute. What's happening here? How am I going to handle this? Because back in the day, I would have cursed this person out. And I really want to curse them out really bad. It's something I really want to do. But my spirit guides, because of my intuition, I know they're also working with me on my anger, finding ways to deal with my anger in healthier ways. So I'll disrupt it. So, for example, when I speak of disrupting these patterns, this is what I mean. So one of the patterns that I struggle with so much is negative thinking, right? So even something like this, right? This workshop, I would sit down and plan it out and be so excited, but then the doubts will creep in. Oh, you're not equipped to teach this. You still struggle with stuff. It's like all of this negativity will come in. So in the past, I would do that automatically, right? It was autopilot. And still today it happens because the mind just does what it does. But I would allow these thoughts to run wild, right? And it was normal back then. So now when I begin to go down the rabbit hole, because that's what it is, right? The rabbit hole of negativity, I have the tools to disrupt these patterns. So it's important to develop those tools, right? Because you want to have them on deck when this starts to happen to you. The tool I use most often is redirection. So I'll redirect my thoughts away from the negativity by replacing it with higher vibrational thoughts. And what I've noticed from studying myself as someone who's gone through very depressive stages and has been diagnosed with depression is it usually starts with a barrage of fucking negative thinking. When you go down that rabbit hole, it's like a rope pulling down your emotions. So now you're going down with it, right? And that becomes like, now you're in this pit of self-despair because of the thoughts. So when I replace those negative thoughts with higher vibration thoughts, it really, really helps. So instead of thinking nothing ever works out for me, I'll start to identify the wins I've had in the past, right? So with this class, so nobody shows up. It's like, okay, I'm going to set the intention that the people who can really benefit from this information and this experience will be present. If that's one person, if it's two people, if it's three people, it doesn't matter. Okay, so, but your technology is going to mess up. Well, I found that Google Meet is easier. I'm going to use Google Meet. And it's just like whatever the barrage is, whatever the negative thinking is, I'm going to be like, oh, okay, well, no, this is going to happen instead. It's like I have to argue with my anti-day. All right. So I do want to address this, though. We have to avoid spiritual bypassing. Do you know what that means? Anybody here? You do, right? So spiritual bypassing is when you use spirituality to kind of spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. Okay, so just like I said, I redirect my thoughts to higher vibe thoughts, right? Be careful with this because there are some things that come up that will assume and ascribe to the anti-Christ, to the anti-you, that are just things you really need to face. Okay, and you can't keep saying, oh, I'm gonna redirect and I'm gonna use my tools to disrupt these patterns. Sometimes you have to face things, and you'll know what that is because it's things that come up again and again. Before we get into our journaling exercise, just this week I updated my agenda to include information from this book. It's called Right Use of Will, and Cian de Rohan is a channeler. So she doesn't say she authored it. It's so cute. She says she received it. Received by Cian. So it's called Right Use of Will, and the subtitle is Healing and Evolving the Emotional Body. And I remember when I came across this book and I opened it up and I was like, oh God, like I knew I needed to read it. Now, some of the stuff she channeled is a little far-fetched and out there. I kind of take all channelers, I'll take their information with a grain of salt. Even my own, like some of the stuff I get, y'all, is crazy. And I'll be like, man, that's crazy, y'all. Why are you showing me this crazy shit? Sometimes I wonder if we're channeling information from other dimensions, like alternate realities, and thinking that we're picking it up from here. So that's why I say I'm open to channeling, but I'm not always going to take it as an absolute because I know how this works being a reader. Having been read, receiving readings, giving readings, I know that not everything we see as readers is going to come out just so. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle when we present the information, and some of it is going to be like absolutely accurate and some of it is going to be a little confusing. So when I read this book, she had some channelings that were a little like, I don't know. But she had some other stuff about healing the emotional body, right? That was really helpful that I want to share today. So one of the things she spoke about, and I'm assuming that she's a she, but I really don't know. But speaks of the importance of authenticity. She talks very firmly about authenticity and saying yes, and this is something for women specifically because we do this a lot. Saying yes only when we truly want to. Avoiding people pleasing and denying ourselves in favor of others. Now, the men I've grown up around, the men I'm around, they find it easier to say no to things they don't want to do. And nobody has taught them in their life typically that that's wrong. But with women, for some reason, we can like start to feel like something's wrong if we say no, or we'll start feeling bad and things like that. So I want us to get better at, and this is something I've been practicing. And when you do this though, people around you, if you're not the person who does this, the people around you will have such a fucking hard time with you saying no to them. No, we don't say no. It's no, I can say no. I don't want this for my life. I don't want this for myself. So in the book, she talks about that. And it's like avoiding overriding your will in favor of others. But also the other side of that, you're not overriding anybody else's will either. So one of the things I've noticed with women is there's a tendency sometimes to use emotional manipulation and, you did this to me and it makes me feel bad and you should change your behavior. But in a way, unless that behavior is like impacting you like in a really harmful way, you're overriding that person's will when you say, hey, you should change the way you think or behave for me, right? So just like we should be able to show up in our full authenticity and utilize our will and not allow it to be overridden, right, by anybody else, it's the same. We have to give that gift to others, so being able to just stand in your will and in your power. So it's really important to go within to connect with your truth, right? And not do things because society or because the people around you say you should. So there's a lot of people in debt because they went to college, but they didn't really need to go to college, but they were told that's what you do in the society, or, oh, you should buy a house. But everybody doesn't need a house, but you buy a house because it's part of the American dream. It's kind of like we've been sold all of these different things and we'll take them up and walk with them. And that's why a lot of people are getting sick. And again, I'm going to direct this to women because so many women I know are not standing in their own will and are so influenced by outside forces. And this is why a lot of women have illness. I'm going to point to, things with the womb health issues, all of those fibroids. When I did a reading on that, I found that it was just energy stored up, all of this trauma and the inability to stand up for ourselves is forming as physical masses in our body. So that leads to breast cancer and all of these different ailments, even heart attacks and things that people go through. But like I said, specifically, I feel like women do this a lot, suppress their will and listen to others. And this book speaks of the importance of stopping that. So in terms of self-mastery, it's something you can practice over time. How can I stand up for myself more? Be assertive. I don't have to be nasty, but how can I choose myself more? And not kind of, push my feelings down and ignore how I feel to be there for other people. We also want to practice radical self-acceptance. So accepting all emotions, even those horrible emotions, all aspects of the self, the light and the shadow. If you have violent thoughts of things sometimes, I know people make that seem like it's the worst thing in the world. Like, your mind is just going to do things. Like, sometimes you just let it do what it does. You don't have to follow it, you know? So you don't want to do any type of suppression. It's all about acceptance, accepting everything that comes up, because suppression causes mental and physical illness. Clearly, we see a lot of that in the world. And one day and I wasn't even channeling. I remember one day, I don't think I was even thinking about cancer, but the divine said to me clearly through my clear audience, from my ability to receive words and phrases, they said, in order to cure cancer, people have to tell the truth. And I was like, what? And I remember reading this book called, Radical Remission. Radical Remission. And this person, they have all of these studies. And a lot of the people who were catching cancer, who were featured in the book, were people who were holding in a lot emotionally, who weren't speaking their truth, who weren't standing on their truth, or who had taken in some trauma that was unprocessed and unreleased, right? So radical self-acceptance and avoiding suppression, right, and really looking at these things helps us to stay healthy. Now, radical self-acceptance also includes you forgiving yourself for your perceived failures. Some of us are really hard on ourselves. I did this, I did that, and it's all my fault. And it becomes like this failure that you walk around with, but part of that radical self-acceptance is radical self-forgiveness. Giving yourself that grace to just be free from that. Everything doesn't have to be like, damn it. It's like, yeah, we're going to make missteps. Nobody's perfect on the planet, So now we're going to do our journaling. And with this one, I think this is going to be our deepest dive in terms of journaling, right? Because I really want us to get clear on something. So all of us at this beautiful stage in our lives know what our patterns and behaviors are, right? I truly believe that. I don't think you would be here if that wasn't the case. So we're going to journal about these 3 particular questions. The first is, what negative thought patterns and behaviors have been a perpetual challenge for you? So I'm talking like things that you just feel like you haven't been able to shake, or that are just like, it's kind of like being chased. What is the thing that's chasing you? And then I want you to try to identify the root of the challenge. Where did this start? Is it something that just started recently? And if so, can you pinpoint when it started? Was it because of some experience you had? Or is this something that you can find roots in childhood? Then the third, and I want you to do, so say you have 3 negative thought patterns or behaviors you list, right? You're going to do this for each one. You're going to go deep, try to identify the root of it. And then I want you to think about like what you can do to disrupt this pattern, right? Like, so when you're triggered, when something happens that makes you go into a negative thought pattern or behavior, or makes you feel like you're about to go there, what can you do to disrupt it? All right, we're going to go through this really quickly. I just feel like it's important to state. So religious indoctrination really can stunt one's spiritual growth, right? Because religion and spirituality, I feel like sometimes we use it interchangeably, but it really is 2 different things in my opinion. Religion can have like these very staunch and, firm rules and regulations, where spirituality is more free-flowing. For me, one of the things I've noticed is that growing up in a Christian household, right? And it's like I kind of took on the religion by default. It wasn't something where I grew, I was growing up and I was like, I like Christianity, I'm going to be a Christian. It was like, no, the people around me are Christian. Mommy's taking me to church. Grandma is a super Christian. My aunts are super Christians, and I'm going to take this on. I want to just let you guys know I do respect religion in the way where it can be really helpful, right? It gives people something to focus on, and people who may not think about morality when they get into religion, they'll have like a moral, a moral standpoint, like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this or I'm supposed to do that. And it, encourages being of service to others. So it's pieces of like that I really, really appreciate. But then sometimes there are some toxic aspects that can really take root in our beings, which we have to be careful of, okay? So I always encourage being careful of becoming enmeshed in religious practices that hinder spiritual growth. And it's always important to check in with yourself and make sure that whatever you're practicing feels right for you. Because I feel like we do bypassing with religion as well. Because there's this notion that you're just supposed to have faith, people don't question what doesn't feel right to them. And for a long time, I did that, right? And I feel like we just have to take those timeouts, because maybe a religion that worked for you or a practice that works for you at one point in your life won't at a different part in your life. But you have to be in tune to figure that out, right? So it's good to look at them objectively if you can. I know that's hard for a lot of people because, like I said, they get caught up in the faith and they feel like because you have faith, you can't have questions, right? You don't question faith, you just do it. So me personally, I said I grew up in a Christian family, right? And what I've noticed is that practice left behind a residue of seeking a savior. So I'm always kind of looking for something outside of myself, some deity to save me from something. And I went from Christianity into a tradition where I was kind of leaning heavily on being, saved by these new deities. So I took the same mind frame into the new tradition, and that's not helpful because I'm still looking for that external savior. So for me, that's been an issue. Sexual repression, because I was taught that sex outside of marriage was wrong, and I've never been married. So am I supposed to be 50 and still a virgin? That doesn't really work for me. So I had like these issues of sexual repression because of that, and judgment of others. I really used to look at people and assume they were going to hell if they didn't believe in Christ. Now thinking back, that's a big fucking problem for me and a red flag. Like, how dare I have the audacity to think that about somebody else? To think that they're going to burn because they don't follow this one particular deity. That's unacceptable in my opinion. So when we're exposed to these types of indoctrinations from a young age, it really takes root. And like I said, I'm a grown woman who switched and went to, a more spiritual practice, but kind of took that same framework with me into the new practice. So it's like we need to take time out to dig out any roots, any weeds, because I really feel like it takes root like a weed, and you have to like take time to dig it out. So one of the ways it can block your ashe, right, your spiritual power, is, say, like me, you have a natural gift for divination, right? Intuitive, psychic readings and things like that. But you're a part of a religion that tells you it's demonic. So then, I stuff that part of myself down. I don't honor it. I don't get to connect with people like you through my readings, right? Or support people with these readings because I'm following this dogma of a particular religion. So it takes consistent work to kind of release programming, because like I said, I still have to remind myself, like, you don't need a savior. You have so many tools right within your own being. I feel like the Most High creative intelligence put so much right here on the earth, so many resources, so much provision on the earth within my being that I can utilize. I don't have to always go seeking for that outside of myself, right, externally. So I want you to think about and journal on. You can do this in your own time, right? If there is anything, any practice, any religious practice in particular, or something you've been exposed to through religion that has left behind some type of stigma. If so, I want you to really journal about that, okay? Like, really take time to do like that page dump, and make sure you're not holding on to any practices out of like, obligation that don't feel right to you. Okay? That's just something I wanted to point to really quickly. Okay, so let's get into ritual. A ritual, and this is something I found to be really, really helpful, right? Now, remember everything I'm telling you, I want you to go within and identify intuitively if this sits right for you or if you can take this and use a variation of it, okay? So, a ritual is an action that is repeated regularly. We each have like morning rituals, right? I get up, I go, I exercise, I take my shower, I rest, I have my breakfast and my coffee, and then I get my day started working on my business. Whatever your ritual is, like we all have rituals, right? You have evening rituals as well. Ritual practices are extremely helpful in developing your spiritual power. Rituals provide the space and time needed to connect with one's higher consciousness and spirit team. Okay, so of course, whatever ritual practices you are going to commit to need to come from your own heart, need to be things that you're truly interested in and that you want to do on a regular basis. Like I said before, anything, that I could say, oh, this ritual practice works for me, but it needs to work for you. Or you might find that at a particular time, there's a particular ritual that really fits, and then later on it won't. Be open to things being in flux when it comes to spirituality, because you'll need different things at different times, right? So, right now, I would say my favorite ritual practices are channeling and journaling. Sometimes I do them together. I receive so many messages by doing this, right? So, I make it a point to use my cards regularly, to sit down and I'll say, okay, what do I need to know today? What do I need to know about myself? What do I need to know for the collective? And then I do a lot of writing, right? And I'll do like free writing and things like that. And I found that to be really, really helpful. But another aspect I wanted to focus on today is altar work and prayer as something, as a tool that you can use to accelerate your ashe. So altars are sacred spaces that we can use to connect with the divine. There are a variety of altars, right? People use altars to connect with their ancestors. There are, in my tradition, we have altars or spaces designated for our Orisha, right, which are are the deities we focus on. People have altars to dragons, nature spirits, fairies, the list goes on, right? But working at an altar consistently provides a dedicated time. Again, it's about carving out that time, right? You're sitting in this sacred space that you've built for yourself. Some people make really beautiful altars, beautiful altar spaces, and you use that time to connect, right? So it's like you're reaching out to your divine support system, and they reach back when you make that time. Okay, so anything can be made a ritual, but I really do appreciate altar practices. I just feel like they're really helpful for focusing your energy and your intention. So if that's something you've been interested in, definitely consider it, okay? One of the things I also wanted to point out also is that have you ever heard of setting up an altar to yourself, to your own being? I love the altars to self because I notice, like, if you're having issues with self-confidence, self-love, right? And if you're feeling like, sometimes we go into these really deep states of self-pity, those altars to yourself, like putting pictures of yourself as a child, right? Different stages of your life, looking happy, or just seeing yourself at different stages. And then speaking to yourself, you're speaking to yourself there, but you're really speaking to yourself, but it really helps to kind of build you up. My ancestor altar, I feel like I used to go more, but because I channel a lot now, I don't have to sit at the altar to speak with them. So that's where I put their offerings, right? But my channeling usually happens wherever I'm doing a reading. Like, okay, ancestors, what do you want me to know? So remember, the spaces we ritualize them, but you can take those spaces with you. Once you get that inside of you, that energy inside of you, it goes wherever you go. So the ritual kind of helps you build up to the point where the altar is you. Just you become the altar. Really think about what ritual practices you're drawn to, what is calling you, right? And then incorporate it into your life like regularly. Like if you're gonna do it once a, once a day, you're gonna do it once a week. Just try to build something in where it's consistently, because I feel like that's when you see the progress. And remember, rituals don't have to be altars, but I know, like, say you've been thinking about working with crystals or something like that. Really start to take the steps to incorporate crystals into your life. Like, research crystals and figure out which one would be helpful for you at the state you're in right now. So it's like, I really want you to take some type of step in the coming days to develop a ritual that you've already been kind of drawn to or feeling called to, right? And if you already have your rituals that you're doing, just keep doing them, if they are helpful to you. So let's go into one of my favorite topics, divination and strengthening intuition. So this is definitely one of those practices that will strengthen and boost and accelerate your ashe. This class is actually a result of following an intuitive prompting. Now, it's important that you consistently set aside time to check in with your spirit team, right? And that's what we talked about with developing rituals. Rituals helps with that. It helps you to really set that time aside to connect with yourself, your own high consciousness, and your spirit team. Now, a way that this can be done, right, when you're connecting with your spirit team is through divination and meditation. But here we're focusing specifically on divination. For those of you who are not, when I say spirit team, I'm talking about a collective, right? A group of beings in the unseen realms, beings we can't see that really rock with us and support us. That can be your ancestors, a guardian angel, and things like that. So, as you know, divination is the practice of attempting to foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge by occult or supernatural means. And there are several divination tools we can connect with, right? So there are the tarot cards that y'all know I love. There's oracle cards. There's charms. You know how people will pick charms out of a bag and get information from reading those charms? I have a bag of charms here. Have you ever heard of the Chinese? It's an ancient Chinese system called the I Ching or the I Ching. I love that one. That's another divination tool that I'm learning that I really appreciate. Some people, like in my tradition, use 4 implements. You can use 4 pennies and cast the pennies and get different variations that show you yes, no, maybe, stuff like that. Some people scry, right? So they can look at a candle flame. They can look at a glass of water. And what's interesting is, as I'm speaking to you, I feel like one of you has the gift of being able to scry. I don't know who it is, but please take some time out to look. Like if you light a candle, take some time to sit and watch the flame or watch a glass of water. I feel like you're going to get messages. So those are some of the divination practices, and also pendulums. Have you all heard of pendulums where you take something on a string, you drop it, and it can tell you a yes or a no, right? So there's so many divination tools. Consistent divination practices, in my opinion and from my experience, definitely strengthen your intuition. And it helps you to develop trust in your abilities, right? Because if you keep doing something, say you use a pendulum consistently, and you start to see that you're getting consistent answers, and then you start to see, okay, well, and really test it to make sure. When I first get a pendulum, I'll say my full name. Is my name Daydream Alston? And then I watch what it does, right? And this is after I'll ask it to show me my yes, ask it to show me my no. Then I'll drop it and ask, like, what's my name? Is my name Daydream Alston? Is my birthday, blah, 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 blah. Just to test it. So that as you start asking other questions, always watch. And you always want to test your intuitive senses, right? And your divination to see. And that's why I always ask for reviews and testimonials, because I want to know, like, what is hitting and what's not. Like, what sounded right for you and was right on the money, and what are you like, what the hell is that? Like, that helps. but it helps you to test it. So in addition to that, right, when you start to practice like different, when you start to use different practices to test your test your divination, but also strengthen your intuition, you'll find out which intuitive specialty you have, because we all have intuitive specialties, right? And mine particularly, the intuitive specialty I have two now, but is the clear senses, right? So clear senses kind of point to which specialty you have. So mine is clear sentience, which is clear feeling, right? When I do a reading on you guys, if you're going through a hard time emotionally, or you're about to go through a hard time, I'll feel it in my body. I've gotten hit with such intense emotions. One time I did a reading, and as soon as I did the prayer, I felt like I was gonna cry. And I said to the client, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, or that you're gonna go through this. And it's funny because when the client got back to me months later, she said she thought I was crazy because she felt fine. Nothing like that was happening in her life. But until months later, when it happened and she listened back to the reading, she said, oh my God, you were picking up on something that was going to happen in months. But I felt it hit my body. So that's clairsentience. Another specialty I have is clairaudience. I'll hear words and phrases. It's called clear hearing, right? Hearing words, sounds, or music. I'm starting to get music a lot more now. But with clairaudience, it's hard to describe for me because I don't hear a voice often. Sometimes I do. Other times it's like an impression that's put into my head of words. And I know that sounds crazy. I don't know how else to explain it. Clairvoyance, clear seeing, having visions with your spiritual eyes. Because I picked up my meditative practice, clairvoyance is coming more online now. So you'll notice you'll do different ritual practices that might boost these, but honestly, the key to opening your clear senses is absolutely meditation. I'll stand on that. Clairalience is clear smelling odors without a definitive source. Anybody ever smell like an ancestor, like the scent of someone who has passed or someone you used to know? That happens with one of my guy friends who passed a couple of years ago. I'll smell his cologne and I'll be like, what are you doing here? You're here. Clairgustance is clear tasting something that's not physically there. Guys, my ancestors do this to me all the time. I think they vicariously live through me because I can eat, I can taste things. They don't have that sense anymore. So sometimes I swear to you, they will tell me to eat certain foods that I was not thinking of. And I'm like, okay, because I like to eat. I'm like, all right, fine with me. Clear cognizance is clear knowing. You have a knowing where you sense things about people and events you could not possibly know. We're always kind of pushing these, like we'll ignore them and be like, oh, no, that can't be true. No, it's true. Why don't you pay attention and see if it's something, like I said, testing it. If you have a feeling or knowing about something, pay attention to that thing and see if your knowing was correct. Because I bet you'll find in a lot of circumstances that it absolutely was. So let me ask, what exercises have you found to be most effective in strengthening your intuition? Or if you want to let me know which of your clear senses is strongest, that would be really cool. We're going to look at meditation and mindfulness. Now, this is absolutely the key to unlocking consciousness, right? And we know this because honestly, for generations, and we hear this about like the ancient peoples, meditation and mindfulness has been used for as long as humans have been on the planet to unlock higher states of consciousness, right? So there's people who will go and take ayahuasca to unlock higher states, but you can just sit your ass down and meditate to do the same thing. Typically, it'll take a little longer, right? But it's still a practice that can help open you up. So I'm going to give you my take on meditation because remember I said spiritual people online make everything look so damn easy. And it's like they sensationalize and romanticize everything. So the way people were talking about meditation, y'all, I thought I was doing it wrong. I was like, well, I must be wrong because I'm not having these experiences that everybody is having. So I didn't like it at first. I would do it and I would feel like, well, how come everybody else is saying they see light or their whole body vibrates when they meditate? I'm not having that experience. You know what I'm having? My mind is going and going and going, and it's never stopping. There's thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and all of these things. So finally, I had a breakthrough more recently with meditation, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what everybody's talking about. So I had this period where, man, how long was it? Maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I was in a state of constant euphoria. So I discovered that there's this inner well of joy and well-being within my being that I didn't know that I can access at any time. I had become so accustomed to being impacted and affected by all of the energy around me, right? By things that people were doing, by things that people were saying, by things out in the world. My own experiences, that I didn't realize that I had this within me, and meditation unlocked that for me. And I remember hearing people talk about how they would, in enlightened states, you would have this euphoric sense, right? And I didn't even know at first that I was having like a spiritual breakthrough, that I was basically entering a new stage of enlightenment. Like the practice of meditation has really helped me to deepen my presence and be more self-aware. So there's times now where I'm doing things where I would have done regularly, like washing the dishes, right? Or walking somewhere, and I'll automatically tune into what I'm doing. And it's like this deep sense of presence. Oh, my foot is hitting the floor. I'm walking. My hands are moving and washing the dishes, as opposed to before when everything was autopilot. For the most part, I wasn't present, right, when I was doing these things. Meditation unlocks presence, deep self-awareness, and all of that magical shit that people was talking about. I'm like, oh, this stuff can happen. I had no clue, but it doesn't always happen right away. So one of the things about me, I'm always going to be the voice of truth and reason with spirituality, right? So I'm not going to come to you and be like, yeah, meditate for 5 days and everything's going to be great and your life is going to change. Everything's going to be amazing and glitter and crystals are going to fall on your head and money is going to fall out the sky. Like, no, the truth is, when you first start to meditate, as I'm sure you know, the mind chatters and chatters and it never shuts the hell up. And the mind is just doing what it's doing. Like, that's what the mind is going to do. I know it can feel daunting. I know it can be hard, but it's like absolutely worth the effort of getting into a groove with it, because you really do see different, like, higher states of your being unlocked. So I'll just give you my rundown of what I do, right? So of course, like I said, ritualizing the practice, choosing a time in a day that make it consistent, practicing for at least 15 to 30 minute intervals in the beginning. It's helpful. And then as you get used to it, I notice it expands. So before it was like, I'd be like 30 minutes. Oh my God. Now I'm like, oh, an hour. That's nothing. That gives me more time to connect with my spirit team. You can find a quiet location, sit or lay down comfortably. If you're somebody who falls asleep easily, don't lay down. I do my meditations while I'm lying down, but I don't fall asleep that easily. So that's fine. And then I want, these are just suggestions. You can play around with these different options, focusing on a word, seeing a word like peace or love in your mind's eye and holding that vision, focusing on breath. A lot of people use that one. I don't really do that one too much unless I'm trying to get back into my body when I'm meditating. Then I'll focus on breath. My favorite really is imagining light emanating from the third eye area. Sometimes I'll see it as the flame of a candle, and how a candle just does it dances. I'll literally envision that. But sometimes I love to just see the sun. Like, I'll see the sun in my third eye. And I notice sometimes when I do that, there's like a rush of energy. I think it kind of connects my chakra energy, which is really cool. Every time I talk about certain things, my crown chakra just starts to tickle. So those are some things that are helpful. And then, I just want everybody to realize, because I feel like nobody told me this when I was just starting to meditate, that when your mind wanders, accept that and expect it. It's going to happen. Your mind is going to mind. It's never going to stop unless you are out your body. That's the only time it stops. So it's always the importance of just bringing your awareness back to your focal point, which is your breath, your light, right? The light or the words you're focusing on. And then what I like to do with the thoughts, right? Because they're going to come. I see it as like a train, right? So it's like the train is coming in the station. Do I get on the train or do I not? So that's a thought. So as the train is going by, I just let those thoughts come. And then when I realize, like, wait a minute, I'm meditating, because sometimes you'll follow the thought without even realizing it, right? And as soon as you remember that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm meditating. I can't stay on the train, So it's like getting off and just getting back into your body and things like that. So that's really helpful. So when we're, those things that we're struggling with, I feel like if we continue to practice meditation, we'll actually see it improve just through the meditative practice, right? Not having to always disrupt it, not having to do therapy and all of that. Something about meditation literally like snaps you out of it. And I really want to know what that is. I don't know what it is, but I think it's so freaking cool. Yeah, and then I always tell people, don't beat yourself up when the chatter occurs in your head, because it will. And then I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have some days where I'm meditating and I get the most amazing insight and information. And then other days the meditation is really difficult. And I just can't. I'm like, what is this? It just felt like I just laid there thinking the whole time, even though I was meditating. So I'm trying to just get better at accepting the flux, the flow of it, where some days I'm going in and I'm getting some, awesome channel messages and guidance for myself. And then there's days where I'm just like, what the hell was that? What is this? And then I also have here some information about mindfulness, but we also talked about that. So, that's maintaining attention or awareness on the present moment without making judgments. This definitely can accelerate your spiritual power as well. Because when you're in the present moment, you have less time to focus on everything that's wrong, right? Everything that happened in the past, that person who hurt you, that person who betrayed you, the fact that you might be struggling a little bit financially, like that deep presence and awareness really helps you to move beyond that. So when you catch yourself replaying past hurts or worrying about the future, bring your awareness back to the present moment. Focus on what you're doing. I like to focus something about focusing on the hands and the feet, and where you are, how your body feels. Remember checking in with yourself, especially when you find your thoughts are kind of going in a darker direction, like really getting back into your being. And that's a way that you disrupt, right? You disrupt the pattern. Oh, guys, another disruption I want to share with you that I do regularly is identifying what I'm grateful for. So I noticed, and that's what happened too. So I was meditating and in a deep state of gratitude and working with the Divine Mother, who's like the cosmic mama aspect of the creative force. And those three things together are what unlocked that higher state of consciousness for me. So what I'll do is when I'm finding myself kind of going into that rabbit hole, here it comes, somebody says something to me, or I'm triggered by something that happened in the past, I'm mad at a failure. What I'm going to do is start being like, okay, what am I grateful for? And I always start by saying, there's so much to be grateful for. I'll put my hand on my heart chakra. There's so much to be grateful for. This is really important when you're going into like those deep, dark, negative spaces and you feel like everything is wrong with the world. There's so much to be grateful for. I am grateful for the fact that I can turn on my faucet and fresh, clean water comes out. I'm grateful that I have access to food. I can go to a refrigerator and eat food. There are people who don't have that. I'm grateful for my shelter. And my shelter is not perfect. I don't even like the location it's in, but I'm so grateful I have shelter. I'm grateful for this banana because if I want a snack, I have a banana. I'm grateful for this technology. I'm grateful for my gifts and talents that I can put together information and present it to you in clear ways, right? Like just everything you can think of. I don't care how bad you're feeling. If one part of your body hurts, put your hand on your heart and say, I'm grateful for all of the other parts of my body that feel just fine, that are functioning well. You know, I'm grateful that I can go and talk to my parents. There are people who can't talk to their parents. I am grateful. I'm in a constant state of gratitude. I don't give a damn what I'm going through. That right there, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how that boosts your, it's like immediately you're like, oh yeah. And then start to really think about how good you have it compared to other people, even with all of the problems you do have. So gratitude is definitely also one of those keys to unlocking your ashe, because it just changes your vibration. It boosts your vibration and puts you in a situation where you remember all of the good in life, because it's so easy to forget it, you know, especially on certain days. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this information has been helpful. Drop an ashe in the comments if you made it all the way to the end. Peace.